everybody, this is AWOL Spartan, and here today we are going to be doing a little bit of a different video. This is going to be a tutorial, mostly, to help everybody out who wants to start using a joystick instead of mouse aim. One thing that a lot of these games do is they have a control setup that they recommend for your specific joystick. I personally, I don't like that. I prefer to have my controls tailor-made for me. So, I'm going to show you my setup, and then hopefully that'll help people to kind of ease their way into using a joystick, and they'll be able to find setups that work for them based off of these basic principles. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my controls. And we're basically just going to go right down the list here. And now, we're not going to do things like the guns or bombs or anything like that. What I'm talking about here today is just basic flight controls. The first thing we'll go into is throttle control. You'll notice right now my plane is burning the WEP. That is because the default setting for the Thrustmaster HOTAS X, if you push your throttle to 100%, that WEP is going to be on. I personally do not like having to baby my controls to find that 100% sweet spot. I can't stand that. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into controls, and we are going to go down here to the throttle axis. Edit axis. The problem is this multiplier. We need to back this off to 0.99. The reason it has to be at 0.99 is because if you have it at 0.1, it's still going to recognize it as being in WEP. And I will show you. Whoop. It's not what I wanted to do. We're going to save changes. And one thing we also need to do is where it says hold throttle for WEP, we need to change this to yes. And OK, and resume. Okay, so having it at 0.1 or having it at 1 still burns the WEP. This is why it needs to be at 0.99. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a button to maximum value. And save changes. Now notice my throttle is sitting at 99% instead of burning WEP. This is with my actual throttle assembly pushed all the way forward. Notice that I assigned a button to the maximum value on the throttle axis. Now if I press that button and hold it, WEP on demand. This way you can preserve your engine. You're not going to burn it out just flying to get into the battle if you're playing realistic mode. This will save your engine so that you can have your engine's full power when you need it. So, moving on. Now we're looking at the sensitivity settings. These sensitivity settings are actually already set to what I prefer them at. I want my roll at 100%, pitch at 100%, and yaw at 70%. What this does is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's how sensitive your controls actually are. If I go into cockpit view and look down at the control stick here, if I move the stick to the left, 1-to-1. If I move it to the right or up or down, anywhere, it's a 1-to-1 movement. If those are set any lower, then your controls will become very sluggish, and it's not a desirable thing to be in whenever you're in a battle. So basically, roll, pitch, and yaw will improve your capability of maneuvering out of the way of an enemy's gun sights. These sensitivity settings are best for just the basic full range of the axis of your control stick. Now, this does introduce a slight problem whenever it comes to fine-tuning your aim whenever you're trying to gun somebody down. That is fixed in the roll, pitch, and yaw axis settings. We're going to go into Edit Axis. What you're looking for is this setting right here, non-linearity. I already have mine set up. It's at 2. I don't recommend going any higher than 2.5 on any of these settings. So it's already set at 2, and what this does is it basically separates your physical axis, which is your actual physical joystick, from the virtual joystick in game. Or at least it reduces the sensitivity towards the center of your axis movements. So if you move your actual physical joystick just slightly to the left or right or up and down, notice the red marker up there. The red marker at the top of the roll axis window there represents my actual physical joystick. Notice whenever I just barely nudge it, it moves out of alignment with the logical axis, which is the actual in-game axis. However, if I move further towards the edge of the controller's full range, you'll notice the green axis starts to catch up with the red axis. This is very important. Like I said, it's for whenever you're on somebody's tail and you're trying to fine-tune your aim so you can get your rounds on target. You need to make small, minor adjustments to do that. The last thing you need is to barely touch your control stick and then you go spinning off into space. Now, if you find that the nonlinearity is not set to what you want it at, or not set at a comfortable range for you, I do not recommend making huge adjustments to it. I'm at 2.0, or I'm at 2 on my nonlinearity. If I needed to adjust that down, I would just jump to 1.9 and try that out. If that doesn't work, jump it down one more. Small increments. Okay, so that takes care of your basic flight controls. Now, view controls. You may have noticed during this test flight, anytime I try to look around, the camera snaps, and as soon as I release the hat switch, snaps back. Snaps back. I don't like that. My preference is to have that set so that whenever I release my hat switch, my view stays exactly where I left it. So we're going to go to Controls, View Controls, and we're going to the View X-axis and Y-axis. You want both of these to mirror each other. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Edit Axis. I'm going to set this to Relative Control, and we're going to crank the multiplier all the way up. What the multiplier does is it increases the speed at which the camera moves. You want it cranked all the way up so that you can look around as quickly as possible, keep your head on a swivel. That way you can catch somebody if they're trying to drop in on your tail. And we are going to assign another button to this because I don't like having delete, num5, or button 2. Or I do like having button 2 on there, but we're going to just make that button 2. We're going to add, and save changes. And then we're going to do the exact same thing to view axis Y. But we're going to assign button 2, add, change this to relative, and boost the multiplier. And save changes. Now we'll go back in. Now when I look around, notice the camera stays where I leave it whenever I release the hat switch. And then to move it back to where I wanted it, I just hit button 2 on my flight stick and it snaps it back to center. Very useful whenever you're trying to keep an eye on your target. And this is worth mentioning. Under view controls, if you look all the way down here, scroll down to the bottom, look back, that is set to the period on my keyboard. What that does is, and it's very important if you're in combat, is check 6. Instantly snaps your camera to look behind you. And as soon as you release it, it snaps back to front. There's one other view control I'm going to go into, and then this video will be able to call it into it, because we're not going to really go into combat and into like your gun controls or anything like that. Those should be pretty self-explanatory. You set those to whatever you want. This is basically just a basic flight tutorial. So tracking camera, enemy. Set that, or bind that to a button that is actually on your joystick. I prefer to have mine set to button 8. I also prefer to have my lock target set to button 3. Now this is just my preference. You can set those to whatever you want. However, I do still recommend that you have your track enemy camera button bound to your joystick or your throttle, depending on if you have a HOTAS setup. And this allows you to just snap your view directly to whichever target you are currently locked onto. Now, one last tip whenever you're using a joystick, if you are new to it, do not, don't go crazy with the controls. Don't go snapping the stick to one side or the other, because you're going to find that you do not have as much control over your plane as you think you do. You want to use very subtle movements with the stick. Keep it nice and smooth. As long as you remember that, you'll have a lot more control over your aircraft. You'll be a lot more accurate whenever you shoot. And you won't spin your aircraft nose first into the ground. So, with that, we're going to call it quits right here. I hope this helps. Anybody who's looking to get into joystick controls, if you like this tutorial, please click the like button and the subscribe button. And I'll see you in the next video.